Is God real? And can you prove that God exists? In today's episode, I'm going to show you 3 strong evidences for God, and how through science, logic, and philosophy, we can say with total confidence that God exists. Hi, my name is David Cipriano. I'm a youth pastor, and I do a lot of studies like this that cover things like Christian doctrines, biblical literacy, apologetics, and in today's study, I'm going to show you 3 reasons why I believe that God is real. And I'm making this study for 3 different types of people. One, I'm making it for the atheist or agnostic who maybe has their doubts or their skepticisms and is seeking truth. I'm making this for the Christian who's maybe starting to question their own beliefs and maybe they have their doubts about whether or not God is real. And I'm making this for the Christian who wants to defend their faith against wrong teachings but maybe doesn't know how or doesn't know what to say. And I think that if we're being honest, we've all wondered to ourselves at some point if God is real. Because you can't see God visibly, you can't audibly hear His voice, and many people have doubts as to whether or not the Bible is true. And maybe you wonder to yourself, if you are Christian, is this real, or is it just something that I was told? And if you've had those questions, then you're not alone. And studies show that atheism and agnosticism is growing rapidly, and that among American adults, the number of atheists has doubled over the last 10 years. Many people in the world are questioning if God is real, and many others just totally reject the idea of there being a God. And there's many major reasons as to why people don't believe in God. One of them is the presence of evil, because people figure that if God existed, then He would stop evil. Some people say that God isn't real because you can't see Him, and why should I believe in a God that I can't see? Many people don't believe in God because of hypocritical Christians. They'll say that if Jesus is so great, then why are His followers not so great? Some people might believe that there is a God, but they might not believe in the Christian God, and they might say, how could you possibly know which God to believe in? But maybe the most common reason given for atheism is a lack of evidence. And I'm going to be honest and say that you can't scientifically prove the existence of God. You cannot prove that God is real with empirical evidence, and no matter how strongly you believe in God, it is still a belief. Believing in God requires faith. And I think that we should all realize that faith isn't just required for Christianity. Faith is required for every belief and every worldview. And atheists will sometimes say that they don't believe in faith, they just believe in science or in evidence. But just like how it takes faith to believe in God, it also takes faith to believe that there's no God. And with all that being said, you can't see God, but you can see the evidence of God. Similarly, you can't see gravity. Gravity is an invisible thing, but we can all see the evidence of gravity. Whenever you jump in the air, you fall down really quickly. And even though we can't see gravity visibly, we can see the effects and the evidence of gravity. And similarly, while we can't see God, and while we can't scientifically prove that He exists, we can see the evidence of God. Whenever you go to a restaurant, you usually can't see the chef, and yet whenever your meal comes out, you know that there was a chef. And we're going to learn in today's study how even though we can't directly see God, we can see some undeniable evidence of God. Because our Christian faith is not a blind faith. No, our faith is backed by evidence. And while you can't scientifically prove that God exists, there's great evidence that convinces me that He does. And in today's study, even though I am a Christian, and even though I'm a pastor, and even though I believe in the Bible, this study will not just be me using the Bible to prove that God exists. Now, I will be showing Bible verses that describe and support these reasons and evidences, but this is not me just saying that God exists because the Bible says so. So with all that being said, here's 3 evidences for the existence of God. Number 1 is the universe's existence. This is also known as the argument from creation, or the cosmological argument, which says that for there to be a creation, there had to have been a creator. And because the earth exists, there had to have been somebody or something that created the earth. Now, some people will believe that the earth never began, it just has always been here, and that the earth was never created, it just is eternal. And there's a couple of reasons why this can't be true. For one, for the universe to have never had a beginning, there had to have been an infinite number of days in the past. And if there had been an infinite number of days in the past, then that means that we never could have reached today. If the past was infinitely long, then we never would have gotten to the point where we're at now, because for something to be infinite, then it couldn't have ended, so it's not really logically possible that the Earth never began. And scientists will universally agree that the universe had a beginning. Christians and atheists will both agree that the universe had a starting point. The Earth has not always been here, it was created at some point. Everything had a beginning. And Stephen Hawking, who was famously an atheist, says, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning. And the fact that the universe and time had a beginning is an evidence for the existence of God. You see, space, time, and matter all had a beginning. They haven't always existed. At some point, they began to exist. And for space, time, and matter to have a beginning, they all had to come from something that is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Something spaceless, timeless, and immaterial had to be the originator of space, time, and matter. And God fits that description because God is spaceless, meaning that he's omnipresent. He can't be contained or put into a box. God is spaceless. God is also timeless, meaning that he's eternal, pre-existing, and never-ending. And God is also immaterial, because as Jesus said, God is a spirit. And there's a couple of Bible verses that I'll highlight that show the eternality of God. One is 2 Peter 3:8, which says that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. Another is Psalm 90 verse 2, which says, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. So God is a timeless being. God has no ending, and God also had no beginning. God was never created, he just simply exists. And because the universe had to have a beginning, it had to have a beginner. It had to have something that was spaceless, timeless, and immaterial to create it, and that's God. See, the earth has not always been here, which means that the earth had a beginning, and because the earth had a beginning, that means that it had to have a beginner or a creator. And this goes to the law of cause and effect, which means that everything that has been affected had to have had a cause. And this is similar to the question about what came first, the chicken or the egg, and it can be a confusing question because chickens come from eggs, and eggs come from chickens, and the cycle keeps going and going and going, but we realize that at some point there had to have been one starting point. So either there was the first ever chicken that laid the first ever egg, or the egg came first and that led to the first ever chicken, which means that everything that was created had to have started by a cause. And the cycle keeps on going where you have something that was created by something that was created by something that was created, and eventually the cycle keeps going and going and going, but at some point there had to have been a beginning. Something that wasn't created but was the original creator. So when we consider the existence of the universe and everything that's in it, we have to consider what caused the beginning. Or a better question might be, who caused the beginning? And I think that the Bible explains this in its very first verse, which says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. You see, God had no beginning, and he'll have no ending. God exists outside of time. God isn't bound by time, and God was not created because he's the original creator. God is that uncaused cause. And going back to the example of the chicken and the egg, there had to have been one chicken that didn't come from an egg, or there had to be one egg that didn't come from a chicken. And similarly, God is that uncaused cause, because God wasn't created. If God was created, then that thing would have been God instead. See, there had to have been an original starting point. You see, God wasn't created, he just always was. And the existence of the earth shows that there's a God, because if there was no God, and if there was no creator, then why is the earth here? Because matter doesn't come from nothing like that. Things don't just pop into existence. Even though the Big Bang Theory is a widely accepted theory, it's not true. I don't believe in it. It's not really scientific or logical. And I believe that the only way that the earth exists is because of God. God is the creator of the earth. And the entire universe is an amazing evidence that God exists. So the first evidence of God's existence is the universe. Number 2, this goes along with that one, and it's the universe's design. This is sometimes referred to as a fine-tuning argument, or the teleological argument, or the argument from intelligent design, which states that the universe is designed so well and so intricately that it couldn't have happened by chance. There had to have been an intelligent designer who wisely created things. For example, if you were to look at a laundry basket and you were to see a bunch of clothes that were all folded neatly, you would know that a person folded those clothes and put them in there. You wouldn't have ever thought that a person just threw the clothes from the dryer into the basket and then the clothes just landed in there that way. Now that would be a ridiculous thing to think. Or similarly, if you walked into a room and you saw dominoes all over the floor and they were lined up perfectly so that they could all fall in order, you wouldn't think that a person just dumped the box of dominoes out and they all just happened to land there that way. No, you would realize that somebody specifically ordered them that way. Or whenever you look at Mount Rushmore, you know that somebody designed it and formed it. That wasn't the way that the mountain always was. It had to have been designed specifically. And similarly, whenever we look at the universe, we can see that the world is designed so intricately and so well that there had to have been a creator. There has to be a designer. These things all couldn't have just happened by chance. As I mentioned earlier, many people believe in the Big Bang Theory, and I strongly reject the Big Bang Theory. That could not have happened. And it's not just because the Bible says that it didn't happen. No, it's because the Big Bang Theory just doesn't make sense. According to the Big Bang Theory, the entire universe as we know it, with all of its galaxies, stars, and planets, was squished into a tiny, incredibly hot and dense point, and then at some point it just blew up, expanded, and cooled down, and the energy and matter in it started forming into the things that we see in the universe today, like galaxies, stars, planets. So essentially, it says that everything came from nothing for no reason. And I don't know about you, but the Big Bang Theory just doesn't compute with me. It doesn't make sense, and I can't accept that. And I believe that it makes a lot more sense that the Earth and the universe had an intelligent designer who specifically created the Earth, not just random chance. Not just a tiny dot blowing up and expanding and forming into the world as we know it. The chances of there being a Big Bang Theory are so improbable and so impossible that I just don't believe it. I think that it's a crazy thing to believe because it's so incredibly unlikely. For example, if a person solves a Rubik's Cube, the way that you solve it is in layers. And a regular Rubik's Cube, the 3x3, has 3 layers. And every once in a while when you solve a Rubik's Cube, you might get what's called a last layer skip, which means that you solve the first two layers, and then the third layer is automatically solved without you doing anything special to solve it. And this is an incredibly rare thing to happen, and mathematically, there is a 1 in 15,000 chance that you will get a last layer skip. For you to get this last layer skip twice in a row, the odds are 1 in 240 million. If you were to get a last layer skip 3 times in a row, it would be a 1 in 5.3 quintillion chance, which would be like 5 million. Now imagine if somebody told you that they had a last layer skip on the Rubik's Cube 3 times in a row. And if you understood how to solve a Rubik's Cube, and if you understood the mathematical improbability of this, you wouldn't believe them. Getting 3 of these in a row would be so incredibly unlikely that it would be crazy to believe that it actually happened. And similarly, when people try to say that the universe and humanity were so intricately designed and that everything came from nothing for no reason, I don't believe it. It would have been so improbable, so impossible, so unlikely that it couldn't have realistically happened. And there's really 2 main places where we see this intelligent design, where we see the fine-tuning of the universe. And one of these is in the Earth. I mean, think about how the human body was specifically designed for Earth. We're able to breathe its air. We're able to drink its water. The temperature is just right for survival. The sun and the moon both are neither too close nor too far away. And we may not realize it or really think about it, but the Earth is full of so many universal constants, such as gravity, the speed of light, electromagnetism, and the Earth is so finely tuned for survival. The Earth has so many universal constants that have to stay that way, or else the world would just go into chaos and we would cease to exist. And the Earth is so finely tuned and so complex and sophisticated that it would be ridiculous to think that this would have happened through just a Big Bang, or just by random chance, or by macroevolution. No, whenever we see the Earth, and whenever we really think about it, and the more and more we study it, it becomes so clear that the Earth had a designer. There had to have been a God that was expertly creating and designing these things. And the Bible speaks to this in Psalm 19:1, where it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." The design and the fine-tuning of the universe points to the existence of God. We also see this evidence in the human body. I mean, think about how amazing our bodies are. We have immune systems that help to protect us from disease. We have kidneys that clean our blood. We have brains that control our heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and many other things. We have DNA in our bodies that is so much more complex and sophisticated than any engineer or scientist has ever designed. And the human body is so intricate that it couldn't have just happened by chance. Our bodies aren't just blobs of cells. Our bodies are not formed on accident. And even though our bodies aren't perfect, and even though we die eventually and we get sick sometimes, it's very clear that we had a designer. This couldn't have happened just by chance. And here's how the Bible describes the creation of man. It says, "The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Psalm 139:14 says, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." Now, people might say that the universe came through a Big Bang. People might say that the universe has just always been here. And people will try to say that we just randomly evolved from monkeys, but that's not true, and it doesn't even follow the laws of science. Now, atheists will often say that they don't believe in faith, they just believe in evidence or science. But really, Christianity's explanation of the universe and mankind makes a lot more sense. And I think that the people who really have faith are the ones who believe in the Big Bang. The ones who actually believe without evidence are the ones who think that we came into existence through random evolution. So I believe that God exists because of the universe's existence, because of the universe's design, and then third, because of universal morality. Cultures from all around the world will agree on certain moral principles. For example, we can all agree that murder is wrong, that lying is wrong, that stealing is wrong, that assault is wrong. And even though people do these things, we all innately know within us that these things are wrong. This isn't something that you really have to be taught. It's something that we all know. And there's been a lot of debate about whether or not morality is objective or subjective. The word objective means that it's factual, unbiased, and based on hard evidence. But on the other hand, subjective is opinion-based and influenced by personal feelings or perspective. So for example, if you said that the sky is blue, that's an objective statement. It's just based on facts and you can't really argue with it. But if you said that the sky is beautiful, that's subjective. Because people might disagree with that. It's really just based on opinion and one person's thoughts versus another's. Another example is to say that LeBron James plays basketball. That's an objective fact. But it would be a subjective statement to say that LeBron James is the greatest player of all time. Because not everybody agrees with that. It's sort of a matter of opinion, and it depends on what you value in a player. And so we have objective statements and subjective statements. Some statements are about facts, while others are just about feelings. And when it comes to morality or the battle between right and wrong, people often debate about whether it's objective or subjective. But the truth is that morality is objective. Now, the people who would say that it's subjective might say, just do whatever you feel is right. Just do whatever your conscience tells you to do. And on the surface, this might seem like a fine thing to say and a fine thing to live by, but what if somebody feels like murder is right? Would a murderer be right or justified if they didn't feel guilty about doing it? Other people say that right or wrong is relative to culture. This is one of the many things that progressive Christians will get wrong. People who say that sin isn't a timeless thing, but rather just dependent on your culture. And one of the major problems with this is that if culture is the determiner of right and wrong, then how could you judge the Nazis? Because the Nazis were doing what their culture allowed. There was a culture that justified those horrible actions. And so if right or wrong or morality is just based on culture, then we can't really justify saying that they were wrong. Other people who believe in subjective morality might say just do whatever is best for society. But if morality is just subjective, why should you feel motivated to do what's best for society? And how would you even determine what's best for society? Because that can be a subjective thing. What one person believes is good for society, another person might say is bad for society. And so morality can't just be determined by what is best for society. And really, if morality is just subjective and not objective, then that means that a parent should never teach their children what's right or wrong. It means that a person should never say to another person, no matter how evil they are, that something is wrong or sinful. And really, there's so many issues with the potential of subjective morality, and that's why we say that morality is objective. Because if there's no real standard for humanity, then it's all just my opinion versus yours. If morality is subjective, then you can't tell me that I'm wrong, I can't tell you that you're wrong. And even if there was just one single objective truth in the world, then that means that objective morality exists. Now, when I say that morality is objective, that doesn't mean that everybody always agrees on everything. Now, people disagree on things. Some people might believe things to certain levels or degrees. But logically speaking, you can't have a good argument against objective morality. And because we all have an objective morality that's within us, objective morality has to have a divine source. Because universal law requires that there be a universal lawgiver. We know these moral truths because God instilled his law in us. And if it weren't for God, how could we know that anything is right or wrong? If there was no God, and if there was no moral compass, then all of morality is just simply my opinion versus your opinion. And if atheism were true, how would we know right from wrong? You see, atheists can have morals. They can have their own moral system, they can be kind people, but they can't really explain why they have morals. But for theists, or for Christians, we do have good justifications for our morals. So I'm not trying to say that atheists can't have morals. What I'm saying is that atheists can't justify their morals. You know, in order for something to be good or bad, you have to have something to be able to compare it to. You can't say that a line is crooked unless you know what a straight line looks like. You can't call something right or wrong unless you have some moral code in your being. And the fact of right and wrong implies that there is a higher standard or law beyond the government's law. And this universal moral law necessitates a lawgiver. And the reason why everybody in the world holds to certain morals is because we all have a moral compass that was given to us by God. It's not just because we knew what was best for society. It's not just because culture taught us the right way. No, it's because God wrote his law on our hearts, which is something that Romans 2 describes. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. So morality is either objective or subjective. If it's subjective, that really just means that it's meaningless. But if morality is objective, then it has to be grounded in some unchanging standard. And all of the evidence, all of the logic, and good philosophy points to the reality that our moral ideas are innate. They are just simply part of our being, because morality is objective. You know, atheists will often criticize Christians for having faith instead of just following the evidence, but what they don't admit is that every belief system requires faith, including atheism, and the evidence is in favor of Christianity. And because of the severe lack of evidence on their side, it takes a lot more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian. Because the universe exists. For the earth and the universe to be here, something or someone had to have created it. The earth hasn't always been here, which means that the earth had to have a beginning, which means that the earth had to have a creator. Some spaceless, timeless, immaterial being that purposefully created it. The universe also has a very intricate design. The earth is fine-tuned for us to survive. When we look at the sophistication of the human body or of the earth, we know that it couldn't have just happened by chance. The earth has a designer. And I believe that there is a God because of universal morality. See, it doesn't make sense that we would all come to the same conclusions on certain moral issues, such as murder, or assault, or stealing, or lying. Humans universally agree on certain moral principles, and it's not just from culture, not just from society. It's because there is a universal lawgiver writing his law on our hearts. Now, when it comes to the existence of God, I realize that there's a difference between there being a God versus there being the Christian God. Because many other religions, such as Judaism or Islam, will also agree that there is a God. And while I only believe and accept the Christian God, the reasons that I gave in this study for God are more about there being a God than the Christian God specifically. Now, maybe in the future I'll do a video about why I chose Christianity over other religions. So leave a comment if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in. So thanks for listening to this episode of the Following Jesus podcast, and subscribe for more biblical teaching like this.